A deadly explosion rocks an airliner flying at 10,000 meters.
A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo.
The blast kills a passenger and cripples the plane. The crew struggles to save 293 lives. The bombing sets in motion an international manhunt. While the terrorist prepares to strike again.
3,000?
We're not getting any oxygen.
We have the terrain alarm. Even Tower, Aero Peru 603. We are in an emergency.
On December the 11th, 1994, Philippine Airlines Flight 434 is 2 hours into the second leg of a routine flight from Manila to Tokyo. An unsuspecting passenger is sitting on a ticking bomb. The explosion on board cripples the flight control system. Unless the pilot can regain control, the jumbo jet may crash into the Pacific Ocean.
This is Philippine Airlines 434. A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo.
The bombing is a frightening new development by a terrorist on the cutting edge of science.
The way that the timing device was hidden inside the Casio watch just made the whole thing very concealable and very worrisome.
But this is more than the hunt for a terrorist bomber. This is a story of how investigators make a shocking discovery. The explosion on PAL 434 is only a test for an attack on American carriers, an attack that would dwarf every other terrorist atrocity at the time. It's before sunrise on December the 11th, 1994. While most inhabitants of this city of 1.5 million have a few more hours to sleep, 26-year-old Amaldo Forlani makes an early start. Forlani is not his real name. It's the alias he's chosen for today's mission. He's actually from Pakistan, not Italy. He is putting his latest invention through an important test. Everything must go like clockwork. In his line of work, there's no room for error. He is a highly skilled terrorist bomb builder. He packs the liquid explosive bomb very carefully. From his apartment downtown, it takes less than 30 minutes to get to the airport. He arrives in plenty of time for his 5 a.m. flight with Philippine Airlines. Before he can board, the bomber must outwit airport security screening procedures. He's designed the components of his bomb to pass undetected by X-ray and metal detection equipment. Or so he hopes. He bought the ticket as Amaldo Forlani. He's a skilled forger, and he has made himself a fake Italian passport with that identity. If his cover is blown, his career as a globe-trotting terrorist is over. Having successfully got the bomb through airport security, he boards his Philippine Airlines flight. The final destination of PAL 434 is Tokyo, but there's a stopover in the Philippine resort town of Cebu, over 550 kilometers to the south of Manila. This is as far as the bomber is flying today.
That's 10,000 feet, and weather's still looking clear.
Thanks, Dex. I'm engaging autopilot. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Ed Reyes speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 434, flying south from Manila to Cebu and continuing onward to Narita Airport, Tokyo.
Flight 434 is under the command of Captain Ed Reyes, a former Air Force pilot who's been flying for Philippine Airlines for 9 years.
And our estimated arrival time is now 5:45. The weather in Cebu is...
The first leg of the flight is fairly empty. Passengers are scattered around the jumbo jet's 400 seats. After takeoff, the bomber is able to move. He chooses seat 26K, located directly over the center fuel tank in some 747s. The cabin is tended by stewardess Maria de la Cruz. She flies domestic routes and has worked for Philippine Airlines for 1 year.
Can I get you some juice or coffee?
Juice, please.
Now the bomber must find a vacant lavatory to assemble the explosive device. Arming the bomb only takes minutes, but requires total concentration. The final step is setting the timer so it will explode in 4 hours' time, long after he leaves the plane. He hides the bomb in the life jacket pocket underneath his seat. He then changes seats. When she returns, Maria de la Cruz notices that the roving passenger has moved seats again. She will remember that he left his breakfast untouched, and that the rest of the flight passed uneventfully. As Philippine Airlines Flight 434 begins its final approach into Cebu, more passengers are getting ready to board the aircraft that will take them onwards to Tokyo.
Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Cabin doors to automatic.
PAL 434 lands in Cebu at 6:50 a.m. and several of the passengers disembark, including the terrorist with the alias Amaldo Forlani.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Maria de la Cruz will also leave Flight 434. A new cabin crew will take over for the 4.5-hour flight to Tokyo. "256 new passengers board the 747 that arrived from Manila. Many of the passengers in this cabin are Japanese. Among them is 24-year-old engineer Haruki Ikegami. He's looking forward to getting home to Tokyo after his first trip overseas. Airport congestion delays the departure by 38 minutes, but the timer on the bomb under seat 26K continues to tick. "8:30 a.m., December the 11th, 1994. All passengers for Philippine Airlines Flight 434 are now on board for the leg to Tokyo. None of them is aware that 2 hours earlier, a terrorist planted a time bomb under one of their seats. Steward Fernando Bayot is assisting passengers in the forward cabin on this 4.5-hour flight. At 8:38, PAL 434 is cleared for takeoff. On the flight deck, Captain Ed Reyes is assisted by First Officer Jaime Herrera and Systems Engineer Dexter Comendador. Reyes and Comendador are both former Air Force pilots. Haruki Ikegami is seated in 26K, the seat occupied by the bomber earlier on the first leg of Flight 434 from Manila to Cebu. Several passengers in this cabin are co-workers, traveling with a Japanese tour group, including Keisuke Aoki and Masaharu Mochizuki.
After takeoff, everything seemed normal. We were flying at 10,000 meters. I was reading a magazine, then the meal was served. After eating, I went to sleep.
31-year-old Yukihiko Usui stayed up all night on the last day of his trip, and he's ready to nap after breakfast. He's sitting in row 27, one row behind the seat vacated by the bomber 4 hours earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. It's a beautiful day in Tokyo, sunny and 26 degrees. I expect we'll be landing at Narita Airport in 2 hours' time.
2 hours into the flight, PAL 434 is cruising on autopilot 10,000 meters above Minami Daito Island, southern Japan. To ease the pilot's workload, the autopilot remains on throughout the flight, keeping the aircraft on a constant heading and altitude.
God forgive me. That was my inner thought, you know. God forgive me. I think I'm going to die now. Then after that, I have to do what I had to do.
Oh, I've lost control. I have control.
Dex, check the pressurization loss. Be prepared.
Checking QRH for...
Although the autopilot instantly corrects the aircraft's bank to the right, the effect of the blast is far from over.
There was a loud bang which woke me up. I could feel the plane expanding from the pressure. I saw smoke as well as debris falling like powder.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seat.
The injured people were trying to get away from the area where the bomb was.
I stood up and saw that a lot of people were bleeding. I thought my life was over.
Stay in your seat, please.
The cabin crew's first priority is to stop passengers leaving their seats. Yukihiko Usui is sitting in the row directly behind the explosion. Both his legs are badly wounded. Steward Fernando Bayot moves him away from the blast site.
Please sit down and fasten your seatbelt.
Bayot now turns his attention to Haruki Ikegami. He has been swallowed by the smoking hole where seat 26K used to be.
I saw this man, only his head and his arms were peering out of the hole, so I tried to pull him out.
After the struggle to lift him out, Bayot realizes that part of the lower half of Ikegami's body is missing. Within a couple of minutes, he dies. The cabin crew do not want Ikegami's death to panic passengers, so they pretend to minister to him. Bayot then reports to the captain.
Oh, Captain.
Okay? Keep the passengers calm. Make sure they stay in their seats. There's been an explosion in row 26. One dead and several injured, and the cabin's full of smoke. There's a hole in the floor. Go inspect the damage, Dex.
Yes, sir.
Reyes' first concern is that the blast could make a hole in the aircraft's skin. This would lead to sudden depressurization in the cabin and necessitate an emergency descent.
There was a huge gaping hole beside her, and if a small tear in the skin of the aircraft was, if there were a hole there, it most probably would open up and then pull us out of the aircraft. When I saw that there was no damage to the outer skin, I went up and reported to the captain. Well, we assumed that the pressurization system would hold.
Immediately after the explosion, the co-pilot's steering wheel slams to the right, and the aircraft banks in the same direction. The autopilot immediately corrects the deviation, but soon Reyes discovers that the autopilot steering system is another victim of the blast.
Then I said, okay, I'm going to try to turn the airplane using the autopilot, but there was no reaction, whether I tried it to make it go down or up, or left and right turns, no reaction. I said, now we have a problem.
This is not Reyes' only problem. In the cabin, one of the injured passengers needs urgent medical attention. Tokyo is still 2.5 hours away, and Reyes decides to try and land at Naha Airport on the island of Okinawa, located 74 kilometers to the west. He orders the co-pilot to make a Mayday call.
Yes, sir. Naha, PAL 434, heavy declaring emergency. Explosion on board. We have casualties. Requesting emergency landing at Naha. We will need full emergency services on landing.
PAL 434, Naha, please repeat. Say again.
Naha, PAL 434, heavy declaring emergency. Explosion on board. We have casualties. Request emergency landing at Naha. We will need full emergency
Getting the Japanese air traffic controller to understand the emergency proves to be difficult.
Naha, Naha, Naha. This is Philippine Airlines 434, flight level 330. A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo. Bomb explosion. Request emergency landing at Naha.
And there was silence. Then the controller came in, another controller, an American. Okay, Philippine 434, I'm taking over.
The American air traffic controller is from an American base on Okinawa.
Turn left, heading.
No, I shot back. We cannot turn at this moment yet. We will tell you when we are starting to turn towards Naha. We have problems with our flight controls.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We will be making an early landing at Naha Airport in Okinawa. We'll be landing as soon as possible, so please remain in your seat with your seatbelt fastened.
But landing at Naha is easier said than done. The autopilot is not responding to any of Reyes' commands, and PAL 434 is heading straight past Okinawa. Reyes must find a way to steer if he is to have any chance of landing safely. But disengaging the autopilot might result in losing what minimal control he still has over the aircraft.
Okay. Let's keep the seatbelt sign on. When we disengage the autopilot, we might lose control, so be ready.
Since the autopilot won't react to any inputs that I make, I was scared if I disengage the autopilot, the aircraft might make a sudden bang to the right that we might not be able to control.
At the count of 3, I'll disengage. 1, 2, 3.
One, two, three. Nothing happened. And then there was, we were relieved.
I can't turn using the controls. Looks like the explosion jammed the aileron. Dex, what's the QRH say about jammed ailerons?
The QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, is the pilot's Bible that lists procedures that must be followed in emergency situations.
Jammed flight controls. Use maximum force possible, including both pilots if required.
Okay. Let's force it.
Reyes tries brute force to activate the ailerons, the panels on each wing which turn the aircraft. Since the explosion, he can only fly straight.
Not getting anything from the ailerons. Can't get off this heading. Okay, re-engage the autopilot while I work out our options.
It's taking much longer to land than was announced.
We were told it would only be 20 minutes, but it was really 1 hour before we landed. It was very frightening.
Although they survived the bombing, passengers are now getting anxious about landing safely at Naha Airport.
Since there was so much time before landing, I started writing a will. I wrote the will to my son, telling him to be strong.
As PAL 434 looks like missing Naha Airport, Reyes comes up with another plan.
We gotta turn. We'll have to use differential power. Disengage auto throttle. Pull back 3 and 4.
Captain Reyes increases thrust to the engines on the left-hand side of the plane and reduces power to the engines on the right. Very slowly, the aircraft starts to circle right. He then lowers his speed to make a smaller radius turn. With guidance from air traffic control, Reyes hopes that the maneuver will eventually line up with the runway at Naha.
So while we were descending on low speed, I tried to test the flight controls, and there are some little reactions.
The elevator is beginning to respond. Dex.
The elevator is a control that makes the plane ascend and descend.
250 knots. Flaps 1 on speed.
In order to land safely, Reyes will need at least minimal control over the elevator and rudder. As PAL 434 nears Naha, he continues to reduce his airspeed.
Flaps 10.
Flaps 10 set. Speed 225.
Okay, she's turning.
Sir, if we reduce our weight, we will be able to reduce our approach and landing speeds. Suggest we dump fuel.
Sige, magaling.
Reyes orders the systems engineer to dump 36 tons of fuel.
5 minutes, 20,000 pounds.
Less fuel means less strain on landing gear and brakes at touchdown.
Check.
I was terrified when I saw the smoke trail behind each wing. I thought something must be burning and there would be another explosion.
As the time to touchdown gets closer, Reyes worries that the bomb may have done more as yet unknown damage to the aircraft.
I'm not certain our landing gear will hold up. Strap yourself in. I'll grease the purser.
So he talked to the head of the cabin crew and he said, "We're not sure if the gears will go down. And in case the gears collapse while landing, be ready to evacuate."
It's either you make it or you die. That's because you cannot do anything anymore.
Runway in sight.
With only minimal control over the aircraft, Reyes faces the most challenging landing of his career. "10,000 meters above the Pacific Ocean on a flight from the Philippines to Tokyo, a terrorist bomb cripples the flight controls of a jumbo jet. As PAL 434 starts its final approach, the 292 people on board are pinning their hopes of survival on the skill of Captain Ed Reyes.
I know everybody was scared. We are all scared. I know that.
Gear down.
The gears were supposed to come down a few seconds, but that was the longest second. Because we were waiting for the greens to come on.
Take a long time.
It took a long time. It was a long few seconds until when it locked.
3 green, sir.
Okay. I'm disconnecting the autopilot and landing manually, okay? Dex, monitor my descent rate, call altitude and speed. Flaps 30.
Okay, 500 feet on course.
Flaps 30 set.
Help me with the elevator. When I say push, I want you to push.
Okay, 200 slightly left.
Correcting. Push.
100. 50. 30. Power off. Pull.
Your last command was pull.
Yeah, my last command was pull.
I made sure that the throttles were closed because he might give a go around and I would make sure that we would stay on the ground.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain speaking. We'd like to thank you for your cooperation and your patience. Emergency crews are on their way. We'll try and get you out of here as soon as possible. Thank you.
The Philippine Airlines 747 is now a crime scene under Japanese jurisdiction. As investigators from the Okinawa Police Department set out to solve the mystery of what happened, they turn their attention first to the dead man in seat 26K. The forensic pathologist recovered 94 fragments embedded in Ikegami's buttocks by the explosion. He suffered severe internal injuries and massive loss of blood. But tragic as it was, the effects of the explosion could have been much worse.
If the explosion had been sideways, it would have blown a hole in the plane and caused an air pressure problem. In a sense, it was good that the blast was vertical. But we have to remember the victim. He died to save the rest of us.
Ikegami's body bore the brunt of the upward blast, but the explosion severed the steel cables in the ceiling that control the rudder and elevator. The charge also severed the co-pilot's control cable to the right aileron, one of the control surfaces on the wing which make an aircraft bank and turn. The downward force blew a hole in the floor and could have ignited the vapors in the center fuel tank, creating a catastrophic explosion. But by chance, on December the 11th, seat 26K was not located above the tank.
Fortunately for us, we took a different version, the SAS version of the 747 that day, and that specific seat for that version was 2 seats forward of the center tank.
The Okinawa forensic investigators immediately start work collecting evidence from the bomb site. They begin with the largest fragments of debris and then systematically work down until the smallest particles are retrieved by vacuum cleaner. Japanese investigators cannot identify the bomb's detonator. But by separating out bits of metal, plastic, and electrical wire that do not belong to the plane, components of the bomb are pieced together. One forensic investigator is able to identify the bomb's timer. By reconstituting dozens of burnt fragments, he discovers it's a modified digital wristwatch. Investigators also discover that one of the bomb's 9-volt batteries is only sold in the Philippines. It's another clue that suggests that the bomber could be based there. Philippine National Police Deputy Chief Sonny Raisin is on the case.
In the later part of 1994, we already started to receive information, intelligence reports, that there were Middle Eastern personalities that were here already in the Philippines.
On the night of January the 6th, 1995, almost 4 weeks after the bombing of PAL 434, the Philippine police get a lucky break. In his Manila apartment, the PAL 434 bomber has enlisted the help of an accomplice to mass-produce his new undetectable bomb. An attempt to burn off chemicals gets out of hand. Acrid-smelling smoke spills out of the apartment. It attracts the attention of the doorman, who comes to investigate.
What's going on? Sorry. We're playing with some fireworks, but it's okay. We put them out, and we have all the windows open inside, and we keep the door closed. It'll be fine, okay?
You all open the door.
No, if we open the door, the smoke comes in the hallway. We keep it closed to go out the window, okay? It's okay. It's okay.
Until the smoke dissipates, the bombers decide to wait outside the apartment. The doorman isn't convinced by their playing with fireworks story and he calls the fire department and the police. By the time the firemen come, the smoke is gone, and they leave after a quick check. The bomber now realizes he's left a very sensitive item in the apartment, and he persuades his friend to retrieve his laptop.
He was too clever a guy to come back and expose himself, because all along he knew that that would be too risky for him to go back and be caught.
The bomber's fear of getting caught is justified. Once Police Inspector Ada Farescal learns that they're from Pakistan, she insists on seeing their room for herself. The police in Manila are on high alert due to a planned visit by the Pope in a few days. What Inspector Farescal finds confirms her worst fears about the intentions of the tenants.
You know. You, stop!
The shot distracts the apprentice and he trips over a fallen palm tree. But the cop discovers he has no handcuffs. The doorman improvises with the drawstrings of his windbreaker. In the meantime, the bomber vanishes. One of the first senior officers to arrive at his apartment is Sonny Raisin.
Incident at Doña Josefa apartment was the breakthrough in opening our eyes that the Al-Qaeda terrorist cell was already operating here in the Philippines.
The Philippine National Police know they've stumbled onto something big, and they inform Interpol, Scotland Yard, and the FBI. When news of the raid reaches the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York, it immediately grabs the attention of FBI Special Agent Frank Pellegrino. For 2 years, he has been hunting a terrorist called Ramzi Yousef, and it looks as if this might be his man.
That's great. Well, he was always our focus since '93. I mean, at the time, that was the, he was the biggest fugitive around.
As Philippine police comb through the apartment, they begin to find more evidence tying Yousef to the bombing of PAL 434.
There was a similarity between the watches that were found in the apartment and the type of watch that was used in Okinawa. Putting together that watch, that was the watch that was on the bomb, on that Flight 434, and identifying those pieces eventually as a Casio watch, it was amazing.
Yousef is a skilled forger. Investigators find several identification cards bearing various names, and photos in each of which he looks quite different. One ID card is of particular interest.
So, almost as a dig to us, the ID card used the First World Trade Center bombing date as the date that the card was issued. So we knew right away it was Yousef that had been in the apartment. They knew chemicals. The chemical dictionary was a very well-used item, underlined, highlighted, well-read, notations throughout the book, something that he used quite often. And I don't remember the exact number. I think there might have been 100 latent prints found on that belonged to him. They knew electronics. The way that the timing device was hidden inside the Casio watch just made the whole thing very concealable and very worrisome.
The identification of the bomber of PAL 434 and the discovery of his bomb factory is very disturbing news for those responsible for airline passenger safety. Ramzi Yousef is an international terrorist who knows how to get his bombs past airport security. Bombs that are small, but if strategically located, can blow up a jumbo jet and kill not just one, but hundreds of people. and the bomber of PAL 434 is still on the loose. The Philippine National Police have stumbled on the hideout of an international terrorist. The FBI identify him as Ramzi Yousef. Evidence that Amaldo Forlani, the man who planted the bomb on PAL 434, is the same person as Ramzi Yousef, comes from the travel agent who sold him the Philippine Airlines ticket. Ramzi Yousef is just one of several aliases of a man who tops the FBI's most wanted list. An international terrorist with a $2 million bounty on his head. Yousef, whose real name is probably Abdul Karim Basit, was born and raised in Kuwait, where his father worked as an engineer. It was there that he met the friend that he enlisted to help him in the Manila bomb factory. When he was 18, Yousef's family returned to their Pakistan homeland. Yousef married and had 2 children. Soon after returning home, his parents sent him to study in Britain.
He was taking classes both in engineering and in using the computer, so he definitely had some talent.
In summer breaks from college in the late 1980s, Yousef returns to Pakistan. He puts his new engineering skills to use by teaching bomb making to militants in training camps near Peshawar, Pakistan. These camps are fertile ground for making contacts with militants worldwide. In September 1992, Yousef flies from Pakistan to New York to prepare for a major terrorist attack. On arrival at JFK, he presents a fake Iraqi passport and asks for political asylum from Saddam Hussein. The ploy works and he's allowed to enter the country. 6 months later, on February the 26th, 1993, one of the largest homemade bombs in American history explodes in the garage below the World Trade Center, killing 6 people, injuring hundreds, and causing $500 million worth of damage. That night, Yousef is on a plane back to his home in Pakistan.
He was an action figure. He wanted to keep doing things. He wasn't happy with the one success he had.
18 months after the World Trade Center attack, Yousef flies to Manila to fine-tune the bomb that he plants on PAL 434. According to Sunny Raisin, the Philippine capital suits him.
Ramzi Yousef loved to enjoy life. He is a ladies' man. He associated himself with a lot of girlfriends, and he liked to party. He also drank a lot. See? And he enjoyed the life. Terrorists. They are your normal day-to-day people, the guy next door.
After the bombing of PAL 434, Yousef arranges for his childhood friend Abdul Hakim Murad to assist him in Manila. But on January the 6th, 1995, 2 weeks after his arrival, Murad is arrested and sent to the Philippine Police headquarters for interrogation. It took 67 days to extract the details of how Yousef planted the bomb.
My impressions of him was that he was strong-willed, he was determined. Initially, he did not break down in questioning. And it was only when the FBI team that came in and provided us with additional information or pieces of the puzzle that we did not have, that he started to talk.
Tiny chemical traces of the explosive were found on PAL 434, and Murad eventually admits that Yousef uses liquid nitroglycerin that he's stabilized and concealed in a bottle of contact lens solution. Murad also reveals that Yousef hid the bomb's potentially suspicious components in the heel of his shoes. Most airport security systems only detect metal above the ankles.
I bet you he was cool as could be. He was somewhat cavalier in his attitude toward these explosives and chemicals. To carry a container of nitroglycerin on an airplane, you know, get me a little nuts.
Murad's confession provides details of Yousef's actions after he successfully got the bomb components past airport security.
Can I get you some juice or coffee?
Juice, please.
Yousef designed the device so the innocent-looking components can be quickly transformed into a lethal bomb. Yousef has modified a digital wristwatch as the bomb's timer. This is wired to a detonator inside the bottle of nitroglycerin. Two 9-volt batteries provide an additional electric charge to the exposed filament of a light bulb that will spark the explosion. Yousef sets the alarm for 4 hours later, when he anticipates the plane will be flying high over the Pacific Ocean. Yousef plants the bomb in a life vest pouch under his seat, a place ground crews are unlikely to inspect during the stopover in Cebu. Soon after, he gets off the plane and disappears. Four hours later, the time bomb under seat 26K awakes the airline industry to a new kind of terrorism. Murad's confession confirms Pellegrino's suspicions. This is just the kind of sophisticated plot he has come to expect from Ramzi Yousef. But Pellegrino is still shocked by what Murad says next. PAL 434 was only a test, a dry run for a much larger terrorist plot that will kill thousands of airline passengers. A highly skilled terrorist, Ramzi Yousef, has already set off a new type of bomb on an aircraft. Now the FBI discovers Yousef wants to blow up more planes. And he continues to evade capture. FBI investigators find evidence of Yousef's meticulous planning on secret files on the laptop that he so desperately wanted his accomplice to retrieve.
On the laptop computer found in the Yousef apartment building was a file which laid out a plan for 5 individuals using code names, individuals not mentioned on the plan, to board about 3 planes each, 2 planes, a couple of people had 3 planes, planting bombs on the planes, and then returning back to their home. Hoping when they planted the bombs and with the timing devices, if everything went well, all bombs would go off within about a 6-hour time period. Any more than one would have been an airline disaster. So, you know, if they were 50% successful in their plan, I think it would have scared a lot of people for a long time.
The file on Yousef's laptop reveals that the plan, codenamed Bojinka, is foiled with no time to spare. The bombing of 12 American planes is meant to kill 4,000 passengers. Yousef's campaign of terror against the airlines is scheduled to start less than 2 weeks after the bust of his bomb factory in Manila. By the time Pellegrino and the FBI team arrive in the Philippines, Yousef is long gone.
So it was a worry and it was a missed opportunity. But we also, on a lot of these fugitive type cases, you know, we're all not that different and everybody goes home. Everybody needs to go home. And so the investigation again would focus back to Pakistan.
The FBI immediately begin a publicity campaign in Pakistan, promoting their $2 million reward for assistance in arresting Yousef. The strategy works. Yousef's latest recruit for yet another airline bombing blows the whistle. On the day Yousef is due to leave his hotel in Islamabad, a Pakistani SWAT team moves in. In Yousef's room are Delta and United Airlines flight schedules, as well as bomb components hidden in children's toys.
Who are you? Do you have a warrant?
The informer receives the $2 million bounty for the tip-off which prevents yet another airline attack.
He was shocked. Did not think he would be caught. He had a certain confidence about him, and I didn't think he thought we'd ever catch up to him.
Within hours of his capture, Yousef is extradited from Pakistan and put on a waiting US government plane. With the cooperation of the Japanese and Philippine governments, the FBI arranged for Yousef to stand trial in New York City for the PAL 434 bombing, as well as the earlier 1993 attack on the World Trade Center.
In a convoy of federal and local patrol cars, Ramzi Ahmed Yousef was brought into New York City late Wednesday night, ending a worldwide manhunt. He was arrested Tuesday in Pakistan by Pakistani authorities and brought back by the FBI on a U.S. plane, then into custody with heavy security on the street in case of any terrorist attacks prompted by his arrest.
At his trial a year later in New York's Southern District Court, Yousef decides to handle his own defense against the advice of the judge. He performs better than expected, but he's found guilty on all charges related to the bombing of PAL 434 and conspiring to bomb 12 American passenger planes. Yousef is also found guilty in a second trial for the World Trade Center bombing. In his final summing up, Yousef justifies his actions.
Yes, I am a terrorist and proud of it. And I only support terrorism so long as it's against the United States government and against Israel, because you are more than terrorists.
Although Pakistani, Yousef describes himself as Palestinian by choice. And he justifies the PAL 434 and World Trade Center bombings as punishment for a US foreign policy that favors Israel over Palestine.
And hypocrites!
For both crimes, he's sentenced to 240 years in prison. The judge recommends solitary confinement for life in the most secure prison in the United States, located in Florence, Colorado. It houses the country's most violent and dangerous prisoners, and it's where Yousef will spend the rest of his life, confined in a cell for up to 23 out of every 24 hours.
We cannot afford to just sit down and count our victories with the arrest of Ramzi Yousef. Somebody else has already replaced him, and somebody else is already thinking of how to circumvent these security measures that we've put up.
In the year following Yousef's attack on PAL 434, the Federal Aviation Administration certified a machine to detect explosives. Not one American carrier bought it. Only after 9/11 was a law passed that required US airports to deploy explosive detection systems. But the most reliable models are expensive or too slow and still not widely employed.
Well, it was the old saying that we have to be right 100% of the time. Terrorists only has to be right once.
Although there hasn't been a successful airliner bombing since PAL 434, those who forget the past may be destined to revisit it. 639 pieces of wreckage are recovered from the sea. 639 pieces that only deepen the mystery of a deadly plane crash.
All right, a little bit more to the right. There.
But when investigators bring up the 640th piece of China Airlines Flight 611, they get their answer.
There was definitely a eureka moment on the dock.
It would be scrutinized more closely than any other piece of debris. On this single piece of wreckage, investigators would find the one clue that would tell them why a modern jetliner with 225 people on board shattered in midair.
Feet. Speed is low, sir. Watch it. Did you feel that?
Target control, descend and maintain. Echo Foxtrot, 126.
May the 25th, 2002.
Gears up.
A China Airlines 747 lifts off from Taiwan's capital, Taipei.
Taipei approach, Dynasty 611, airborne passing 1,600.
Dynasty 611, Taipei approach radar, contact climb and maintain flight level 260.
260, Dynasty 611. Autopilot B, engage.
China Airlines is Taiwan's national airline. There are 225 people on board Flight 611. Today's flight is a short one. 1 hour and 40 minutes across the Taiwan Strait to Hong Kong. This route is one of the most widely traveled on the planet. It makes so much money, it's called the Golden Route.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fasten seatbelt sign has been turned off. For your safety, we do recommend that you keep your seatbelt fastened at all times while seated.
Minutes after taking off, Flight 611 climbs steadily above the Taiwan Strait. The plane's autopilot controls the ascent. And then, 20 minutes after taking off, at an altitude of almost 35,000 feet, at Taipei Area Control, the flight vanishes from radar.
Dynasty 611, Taipei. Dynasty 611, Taipei. I've got a plane off radar. China Airlines 611. Its last known return was east 119.67, north 23.98.
Taiwanese authorities quickly launch one of the largest rescue missions in that country's aviation history.
本时段备勤同仁，本时段备勤同仁，请立即至值班室集合。科研，麻烦你帮我。海顺动幺，海顺动幺，呼叫美方动幺，听到请回答。
我是同时下达。
I gave a clear order that the priority would be searching for whoever was still alive, then bodies, and then, only then, wreckage.
务必全力以赴。
More than 1,000 people take part. Fishing boats, the Coast Guard, and Taiwan's military race out to sea. Flight 611 was 55 kilometers from the Taiwanese shore, just north of the Penghu Islands, when it disappeared. Rescuers find debris floating in the Taiwan Strait.
The first thing we saw was a great amount of wreckage, including landing gear wheels, napkins, knives, and forks.
Wreckage from the plane is spread far and wide. Some items are found on land more than 100 kilometers away in central Taiwan. As the rescue effort continues, Taiwan's Aviation Safety Council begins its investigation into the crash of the 22-year-old plane.
747-200, delivered August 2nd, 1979.
Kay Young is the managing director of the ASC. He'll be leading the investigation.
We're setting up a command post in Penghu Island. Let's go.
China Airlines have had very, very poor safety record. As a matter of fact, it was considered one of the worst in the world. Typically, it had like one major accident every 4 years. This particular investigation was by far the most difficult one. And one of the reasons why was it's in the ocean floor.
The search for survivors goes on around the clock. There were 225 people on the airplane. Nobody is found alive. The bodies are taken to the Penghu Islands to be identified and examined. Since the accident involved an American-made plane, the NTSB joins the investigation. A team of investigators is dispatched to Taiwan. They'll be led by John DeLisi in Washington.
We have a very good working relationship with the ASC, the Aviation Safety Council of Taiwan, so we knew that they would ask for and welcome our assistance in the investigation.
Wreckage that's found floating is also brought to the Penghu Islands. Investigators need to know how one of the world's most successful planes, on one of the world's most traveled routes, simply fell out of the sky.
Well, the Boeing 747 is the world's most popular jumbo jet, and it's flown millions of people, probably billions of miles. We were very concerned.
Good morning. I'm anxious to see what you have.
Sophisticated ground-based radar tracked Flight 611 throughout its short journey. It should provide investigators with a much clearer picture of the flight than the radar at air traffic control. Kay Young gets the first major clue in this case. The radar tracked the plane as it climbed on course to 35,000 feet. Then suddenly, Flight 611's signal split apart.
The breakup is quite graphic.
Right when the event happened, it appeared as if there were 3 or 4 sizable pieces of wreckage that were getting radar returns that then began to drift and scatter as they fell to the earth. So that told us that the airplane broke up in flight.
Investigators now must turn their attention to finding out what caused that breakup.
There's all kind of theories about, what seems to be happening of that particular aircraft.
We knew that something massive had happened suddenly, without warning.
It doesn't take long for the media to consider a sinister possibility. That Flight 611 was shot down. China and Taiwan have a combative relationship. China has fired missiles towards Taiwan in the past. There's suspicion in the media that China shot down Flight 611.
There were a lot of theories about, it was shooting down by enemy fire.
Only 8 months earlier, a Siberia Airlines flight with 78 people on board was shot down over the Black Sea. It was accidentally hit by a missile fired from Ukraine during a training exercise. On the day of the China Airlines crash, China was conducting military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. But officials there insist no missile was launched towards Flight 611. None of the wreckage recovered so far has any of the telltale signs of being hit. And there's no evidence on radar that there was ever a missile heading for Flight 611.
Once the evidence began to come in, it very quickly ruled out a missile, much the same way that it ruled out it being a mid-air collision. There were no other objects in the air near the airplane.
Few things would cause a plane to break up in mid-air. One of the big ones is a bomb. Medical examiners check the bodies that have been recovered for burn marks and shrapnel. They find none. The plane's metal skin would be torn and curled in a very particular way if there had been a bomb on board. Investigators find no such damage on any of the pieces. But to rule out a bomb, they'll have to find more wreckage.
I think that'll be it for floating wreckage.
The team from the NTSB arrives in Taiwan.
Morning, I'm Clint Crookshanks from the NTSB. Hello.
Good to see you, gentlemen. I'm afraid we still don't have much.
Clint Crookshanks is a structural engineer who knows the 747 intimately.
I didn't have any preconceived notions. This was my first major accident working for the NTSB.
We are not getting much from the floating debris. In-flight breakup. That's all we know.
Taiwan's Civil Aeronautics Authority doesn't take any chances. They ground all of China Airlines 747-200 series planes until they can be inspected for mechanical flaws. This puts added pressure on investigators to find out what happened.
Thank you for bringing these.
To the NTSB, this accident seems to have a lot in common with one of the world's most studied plane crashes. That of TWA Flight 800, 6 years earlier. Like the China Airlines flight, it broke into pieces while still climbing. That plane crashed into the Atlantic shortly after taking off from New York.
TWA Flight 800 was the biggest investigation the NTSB has ever done. It lasted about 4 years.
The painstaking investigation uncovered a design flaw with the 747. Wiring near one of the plane's fuel tanks could spark and ignite the fuel in the tank. Investigators conclude that's what likely caused the crash. Investigators are struck by similarities between the two flights. Both were 747s. Both disintegrated without warning while still climbing. Both flights took off in very hot weather. The heat may have caused Flight 800 to explode. That plane sat on the tarmac with its air conditioning running. Investigators believe hot air from the air conditioner overheated the plane's fuel. The early evidence is pointing to a repeat of TWA Flight 800.
So it looks really very, very similar. So therefore, our immediate focus was essentially the central fuel tank.
Three weeks after the crash, the Jan Steen, a sophisticated salvage vessel, arrives in the Taiwan Strait. It's equipped with divers, a diving chamber, and a remote-operated submarine, complete with sonar and video cameras.
The NTSB were tasked with manning the recovery vessel and watching video screens from the ROV.
Using sonar, investigators have located the wreckage of Flight 611 deep underwater.
All right, to the right a bit.
Clint Cruikshanks knows all the pieces that make up a 747, but he's never seen them like this.
It was really quite a shock when I first saw pieces on the floor of the ocean. With only the lighting of the ROV to guide you, you would notice something that looked like an airplane part. The ROV would then circle around the part, looking at it from all angles.
Cruikshank's job is to help the Taiwanese identify specific airplane parts among the wreckage.
I think it takes a different kind of mind to be able to look at a mangled part and kind of straighten it out in your head to really determine where it comes from on the airplane.
All right, a little bit more to the right. All right, go back. There, okay, that's definitely a piece of wing. Let's mark it.
Once a piece is identified, its GPS coordinates get recorded. The GPS mapping tells investigators that the debris is spread out over 325 square kilometers. It will be difficult to track down specific pieces of the plane. 25 days after the crash of Flight 611, the plane's 2 black boxes have been found. One contains voice recordings of conversations in the cockpit. The other, data from the plane's flight computer. Either could hold the clues that will reveal what happened during the final minutes of the flight. If the answer is on the tape, investigators may not have to bring up more wreckage to the surface. The data is critical.
Everybody ready?
Investigators begin with the plane's cockpit voice recorder. They hope that the pilots will have said something to each other about an emergency on board.
Welcome aboard, China Airlines.
The recording begins about 10 minutes before the plane took off.
20.
Preparations for the flight sound normal.
Okay, after start checklist.
After start, anti-ice.
The crew checks all their systems and runs through standard checklists.
Off. Off.
It was very, very experienced crew. Both the captain and the flight and first officers were quite seasoned.
Dynasty 611, runway 06, wind 050 at 9 are cleared for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, Dynasty 611. Takeoff. $80.
Check.
V1. Rotate.
Flap 5.
1, green. Okay, flap up.
Investigators listen to more than conversations. They also want to hear if the plane itself was making any unusual sounds.
Noises on the cockpit voice recorder can either be audible spoken words that are recorded by a microphone, or they can be structural discrepancies that are picked up by the microphone.
Taipei Control, descend.
If anything, though, this cockpit is unusually quiet.
Unit Air 608, reduce speed 210 knots.
The captain seems relaxed.
200 knots, roger. Unit Airway 608.
The microphones pick up the sound of controllers talking to other planes.
And Asia 536, fly heading 050.
Heading 050.
In the moments before the disaster, nothing seems wrong. There are no unusual sounds.
Now descend and maintain 250.
The final words spoken in the cockpit are from Captain Yi Cheng-fung.
2,000.
He calls out the distance to their cruising altitude. That's followed by the sound of a chime, alerting the crew that they're nearing 35,000 feet. And then the cockpit microphone picks up the sound of the plane breaking apart. Half a second later, the recording stops.
The cockpit voice recorder indicated that the conversation of the cockpit crew were totally normal, and all of a sudden just died.
The recorders told us that something happened, but it wasn't enough to tell us exactly what it was yet. Many things had been ruled out by then, but we didn't have the golden nugget. We didn't have the real piece of evidence that told us what initiated the breakup of this 747.
After the disappointment of the voice recorder, studying the wreckage becomes the only option for investigators. They focus their efforts on items that can either prove or disprove the link to TWA Flight 800.
So we play a lot of focus on the wreckage observation, examination of the central fuel tank.
On July the 12th, 48 days after the crash.
Okay, whoa, whoa. A little to the left, please.
Success.
All right. That's definitely the central fuel tank. Okay, let's mark that. Let's bring that up.
The tank joins the sea of wreckage piling up at the pier. Investigators study it closely for any evidence that it exploded. If it did explode like the TWA tank, it would be curled and twisted. And the metal would be bent outwards. But this fuel tank is different.
And we found the central fuel tank was relatively intact.
And it's crumpled inwards. Unlike the tank from the TWA flight, there's no soot. There would be if the jet fuel inside had ignited.
So at that time, we pretty much ruled out it was the cause of the central fuel tank.
The wreckage recovered so far has also forced investigators to abandon another theory, that a bomb brought down the plane.
None of the wreckage showed any evidence of sooting, any kind of explosive damage.
The China Airlines crash was neither a repeat of TWA Flight 800, nor a deliberate bombing. Investigators are running out of leads. As more wreckage is identified and recovered, investigators find an intriguing clue. It's discovered when they examine a series of small vents from Flight 611. All commercial jetliners have dozens of these vents near the floor. They're essentially pressure release valves. They're called dado panels, and there's only one reason for them to open. If the cargo area underneath the passengers were to suddenly decompress, the pressurized air above would exert so much force on the floor that it could collapse and damage vital flight controls. That's precisely what happened to a Turkish Airlines flight in 1974. The pilots couldn't control their plane after their cargo door blew out.
We've lost it!
If the floor on that flight hadn't collapsed, the pilots may have been able to save the plane. After that accident, the NTSB recommended that manufacturers install many more relief vents between a passenger plane's upper and lower levels. If there is decompression in the cargo area, the dado panels open automatically and release the pressure on the floor. There were 65 dado panels on the China Airlines flight. 19 of them were recovered from the ocean. 4 recovered panels were in the open position. It tells investigators that there must have been a sudden loss of pressure beneath the passenger cabin. But it doesn't tell them what caused it. The dado panels lead investigators closer to solving the mystery of this crash. But it's just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. There are hundreds of pieces of wreckage to be examined for clues. Kay Young now wonders if a few of those pieces might be able to tell him where the decompression originated.
I've been reading about the trajectory analysis you did on Flight 800. I'd like to try it.
Ballistic trajectory analysis is a technique that US investigators used to figure out how TWA Flight 800 disintegrated. It's impossible to do without specialized computers.
We figure that because it disintegrated in the midair, the ballistic analysis from which the NTSB did in TW800 could be very, very useful to us to help us to analyze the trajectory of the flying debris.
The analysis is based on a simple fact. The pieces that came off the plane first would be the first to hit the water. If investigators can figure out which pieces those were, they'll know where the trouble began. Radar that had been tracking the plane as it climbed also ended up tracking pieces of debris as they fell. The salvage workers have recorded the precise location of those same pieces of wreckage. Their logs could match a specific piece to its radar track. Investigators know the wind speed on the day of the crash, and they can obtain precise information about ocean currents. The last piece of the puzzle comes from the plane's flight data recorder. The plane's altitude, speed, and direction at the time of the breakup. As they're brought to the dock, every single piece of wreckage has been logged and numbered for identification.
327.
Kay Young selects 18 pieces of wreckage for the computer analysis. Some from the front, some from the middle, and some from the back of the plane.
199.
Along with all the other data, he'll feed information about each item's weight and shape into the computer.
526.
Based on where the pieces fell, the computer should be able to calculate which of those 18 pieces was the first to come off the plane.
Can we see when each one of those items separated from the aircraft?
All of the data paints a telling picture of what happened at 35,000 feet. Kay Young gets to see how Flight 611 broke up, from beginning to end.
The tail came off first.
Along with the dado panels, it's a very important clue.
Well, that pretty much indicating that there's something happened in the back of the aircraft, rather than something happened in the forward part.
Investigators are now keen to recover items from the rear of the plane. Hundreds of pieces of wreckage are piling up at the pier on the Penghu Islands. The NTSB sends metallurgist Frank Zakar to Taiwan to examine the wreckage.
I was walking along the yard where the wreckage was placed, and at that time I walked up to item 640 and noticed that there were some peculiar areas of interest that I wanted to look at a little bit further.
With this battered piece of metal, investigators have struck gold.
There was definitely a eureka moment on the dock. That was, hey, we might have something here.
Hey, it's Frank. I think we found your golden nugget.
Item number 640 would give investigators a revealing glimpse into the past and lead them to conclude that the crash of Flight 611 actually began 22 years earlier.
Let's get as many pictures as we can.
The massive piece of fuselage that has caught Frank Zakar's attention is exactly what investigators have been searching for. It includes a piece of the belly, the sidewall, and the rear cargo door. It's from the back of the plane, precisely where the analysis told them the breakup had begun.
This piece of wreckage was highly unusual. It wasn't what we were seeing on all the other pieces, and it immediately drew our attention and drew the focus of the investigation.
The way most of the metal is torn suggests it ripped apart violently in midair.
aerodynamically, as an airplane's moving through the air, if it were to break apart, just the force of the incoming air at over 500 miles per hour will just break up perfectly good structure. That's what we call an overload fracture. So most of the pieces that came up early were just indicative of that kind of overload.
When metal breaks due to overload or overstress, it comes apart at an angle. But the fractured edges of piece number 640 aren't angled, they're flat.
What do you think?
It's definitely not overstress. It's metal fatigue.
Fatigue fractures happen when metal is stressed repeatedly over time until it breaks. It looks very different from a stress fracture.
Typically, a metal fatigue crack will have a flat appearance. It'll be very smooth.
That's exactly the kind of crack that investigators observe on piece number 640. That tells them it didn't break off the plane suddenly as it fell from the sky. This piece separated from the plane over time. Had it caused the deaths of 225 people?
There was much more work that needed to be done. A detailed analysis of the piece had to be done in order to see if this in fact was the smoking gun.
There's something else about this piece that stands out. It has a metal patch on it. It's called a doubler plate. It's the equivalent of a patch on a punctured tire. It's not unusual to find numerous doubler plates on older planes like this one.
A doubler plate is like a patch that you put over fuselage skin. If there were to be a tear or a blemish, a crack identified, you'd want to repair the fuselage back to its original strength, and one way to do that is to put a doubler plate or a patch right over the existing structure.
At some point, this section of the 747 had been repaired. Investigators need to know why it was fixed and how that was done.
We're looking for repair to the aft lower lobe. Whatever it was big.
Investigators sift through 22 years of documents. But the records are sketchy. Finding details on one particular repair could take time. There's something about this particular doubler that catches Frank Zakar's attention.
The outside of the fuselage contained longitudinal streaks that appeared to emanate from between the doubler plate and the skin.
Something is leaking from underneath the metal patch.
Was there a possibility that the skin had broken, cracked, and was there any fuel or air coming out from between the doubler and the fuselage? And that warranted further examination.
Let's cut it from here to here and send this piece to Chongshan.
In order to see what's underneath the doubler, a large section of piece 640 is sent to a lab. No evidence has been found of structural or mechanical problems with Boeing's 747-200 airplanes. Taiwanese aviation officials have no reason to keep the planes on the ground. The Chongshan Institute of Science and Technology is a military research facility. It's at the forefront of Taiwan's space program. This is where investigators take a section of piece number 640 for a closer examination. The NTSB's Frank Zakar finds a telling clue on the crack itself.
When I looked at the fracture surface, I found that this one specific area was covered with aluminum oxide, pretty much similar to rust on a car.
Years of exposure to oxygen changes the color of metal. The discoloration tells investigators that this particular crack at the rear of the airplane has been there for a very long time. Then, when the doubler is finally removed, Investigators get a look at the aluminium skin underneath. They're intrigued by what they see.
When we disassembled the doubler plate from the skin, we noticed that there were some fairly long gouge marks.
This is beyond the kind of damage a doubler is meant to patch.
That was an aha moment that we might have something here.
The search of the plane's documents also pays off. The records contain a very short reference to a mishap 22 years earlier, when this plane was only 6 months old.
Speed is low, sir. Watch it.
Its tail scraped the runway while landing.
Did you feel that?
It happens when a plane lands or takes off at too steep an angle. It's called a tail strike.
Dynasty 009, Hong Kong Tower. We observed smoke and sparks from your tail on landing.
Roger, Hong Kong Tower. We'll have that looked at. Tail strike, sir. I better log that.
It is a relatively common occurrence. It's not a good thing. Some airplanes even have what's called a bumper in that portion of the aft fuselage, so that if the tail ever does get too close to the ground, instead of sacrificing skin from the fuselage, you might have this sacrificial bumper that will take that wear.
Tail strike damage is routinely repaired. Investigators want to know how China Airlines went about fixing the plane. They can only find a brief mention of the repairs that were done in the plane's logbook.
That's all there is?
That's all we could find.
There's not a lot of detail in China Airlines records.
China Airlines indicating they could not find any of those documents. And when we start looking for it, we could not find any. And they said it probably got lost.
The documents that do exist show that the day after the tail strike, China Airlines did a temporary repair. Workers attached a large aluminium plate over the damaged area.
What do we know about the permanent repair?
It doesn't get much better.
A more permanent repair was to be carried out within 4 months.
This is what we got.
The maintenance records indicated that the permanent repair was done in accordance with Boeing recommendations in their structural repair manual. Evidence that we uncovered indicate that the repair was not done per the Boeing repair manual.
According to the manual, many of the scratches on the plane were too deep to be repaired. The entire damaged section should have been cut out and replaced.
You have to follow certain procedures, and the Boeing structural repair manual indicating very clearly what you should do step by step.
22 years later, investigators can tell that for some reason the damaged piece was not replaced. The scratches from the tail strike are still there. China Airlines engineers tell investigators that the scratched area was too large to cut out, so they sanded the scratches down instead.
In the event of scratching, it depends on how deep the scratches are. If they're not very deep, they can be blended out. But if the scratches are too deep, the repair technique that's called for is to actually cut out all of the scratched material and then design a doubler patch that's larger by a big percentage of the structure that was originally removed.
The scratches weren't sanded down or cut out. They're still there. Maintenance workers then made one final mistake.
They put the doubler plate right over the scratched material. The doubler plate that they put on was not 30% larger than the affected area. In fact, it was barely, maybe not even in certain locations, larger than the area that was scratched.
Even though the repair wasn't done according to Boeing's instructions, the way it was logged made it seem like it was. So for 22 years, anyone reading that entry would assume the damaged area had been cut out as it should have been.
Pieces were really starting to fall into place now. Once we saw this piece of structure that had the fatigue cracks in it, And we realized that it came from a structural repair that was not done properly, that was left to fly for 20 years.
Airborne passing 1,600.
Things began to make sense.
By covering an improper repair with a doubler and then documenting the repair as meeting Boeing standards, the workers made their mistake impossible to detect.
What was so insidious about this improper repair was that the doubler plate hid all of the damage. So if you weren't there watching them do this repair improperly, you wouldn't know that it was done improperly. You would have assumed that the structure underneath had been cut out the way it was supposed to.
And every time the plane took off over the next 20 years, the concealed problem got worse and worse. The air inside a commercial airplane is pressurized. As the plane climbs, air is forced into the cabin to keep the pressure inside the plane greater than the pressure outside. It's like inflating a tire. The inside air pushes against the plane's skin.
Each time the airplane pressurizes, pressure builds up inside the fuselage of the airplane. That crack could open up for a certain amount of inches or microns or millimeters.
The plane's skin expanded and contracted a little bit every time. Because they weren't properly repaired, the cracks grew and spread. Eventually, the crack grew into a stunning 2.3 meters.
If you were charting the crack, you would have seen very slow growth early, but as time went on, the growth was getting bigger and bigger.
A small scratch had grown into an enormous problem. Then in May 2002, as Flight 611 climbed, that problem killed 225 people.
As the airplane climbed in altitude and the fuselage was pressured, that put enough strain on this growing crack that it reached its critical length. And from there, it just spread like a spider web. It went in all directions, and it probably looped all the way around the fuselage to the point where the entire aft section of the airplane just broke off from the rest of the structure.
The plane went into a steep dive. The force of the air on what was left of the plane quickly ripped it to pieces. Investigators know that an unseen crack caused Flight 611 to break apart. They now discover that China Airlines came heartbreakingly close to finding that crack and saving 225 lives. The China Airlines 747 was in regular service for 22 years following the improper repair to its skin. It took off and landed more than 20,000 times. Over the years, mechanics would have scrutinized the plane.
There's regular inspections per the Boeing maintenance program that have to be performed on the airplane.
But the massive crack forming at the rear of the plane was never detected. Another accident in another country almost led China Airlines to discover the hidden damage. In 1988, the roof peeled off an aging Boeing 737 owned by Aloha Airlines. As a result of that incident, the Federal Aviation Administration laid out an inspection procedure for older planes. Airlines around the world were forced to inspect their planes much more diligently for corrosion and cracks. The regulation called for airlines to reevaluate all existing repairs to a plane's structure.
Indications on this airplane were that if they had looked at the maintenance records and compared it to the repair, they would have had to remove the repair and redo it.
China Airlines took the first steps of the new procedure in 2001, a year before the accident. The airline identified and photographed 31 different doublers on the 747, including the one over the catastrophic crack. Those pictures show investigators that China Airlines overlooked a vital clue that could have warned them of the looming danger.
We examined the photographs that China Airlines took of the repair, and noticed that there was some issues that may have warranted further investigation.
Investigators see a dark brown stain on the outside of the plane. It's the same mysterious staining that led Frank Zakar to suspect there was a hole behind the doubler when he first saw it on the pier. So why hadn't this stain raised alarms before the crash? For years, passengers on China Airlines' doomed 747 were allowed to smoke. They filled the pressurized air with nicotine. The smoke was being forced out through the crack at the rear of the plane. Over time, that smoke left a nicotine stain on the outside of the plane.
It was very vivid. Any experienced maintenance engineer be able to spot it right immediately.
Smoking hadn't been allowed on China Airlines for 7 years before the crash. It tells investigators that the crack in the plane had been there for at least that long. But instead of investigating the source of the staining,
we need to conduct the new inspection when we do our next major check.
China Airlines scheduled the second part of the FAA's procedure, a detailed inspection of the repaired areas.
And that would be the 7C check, currently scheduled for November the 2nd, 2002.
But the 747 never made it to November 2nd, 2002. It came apart over the Taiwan Strait 5 months before the inspection that would have undoubtedly uncovered its hidden flaw. Investigators want to prevent a similar accident from ever happening again. They recommend that aviation agencies around the world immediately inspect repairs for any possible hidden damage.
We were no longer going to accept just a quick write-up that the repair was done properly. If the repair didn't have all the necessary documentation to allow us to know it was done properly, we were requiring operators to take doubler plates off and do a visual inspection of the structure underneath.
The National Transportation Safety Board issues its own recommendations. The board asks that maintenance personnel be warned of the consequences of hiding the kind of damage that could lead to the structural failure of an airplane.
The moral of this story is that the repair has to be done properly. As a mechanic, when you're doing work on an airplane, you're not thinking about the people who might be flying on that fuselage 20 years from now, but their safety depends on you doing the repair properly.
China Airlines has revised the way its fleet is inspected and maintained. Its safety record has improved dramatically since the crash of Flight 611. Investigators also proposed the development of new tools that would allow mechanics to detect damage behind a doubler. Such tools are being used today.
Boeing developed a non-destructive procedure that can find cracks in the fuselage underneath the doubler.
That device uses ultrasound, sound waves that travel through metal. It can reveal damage underneath a doubler. It's the same technology that allows doctors to observe a fetus while it's still inside the womb. The device would have been able to detect the crack behind Flight 611's doubler plate. But the technology has some limitations.
A great number of hours are required just to do one specific area of the airplane, but the technology is getting better.
The problems that led to the China Airlines disaster are not going away. Planes the world over are getting older. And older planes need to be more thoroughly inspected for cracks. 6 years after the China Airlines crash, Southwest Airlines in the United States was hit with a record-breaking fine. $10.2 million for missing inspections designed to find cracks.
The finding of Southwest brings back into focus how important it is to do maintenance properly on an airplane.
A proper program of maintenance and inspections can be costly. But as China Airlines showed, the price of not maintaining aging planes is even costlier.